On the scorching day of June 25th, 1876, two young warriors, Weasel Bear and Drags the Rope, found themselves at a pivotal moment in history at Greasy Grass. As the Sioux and Cheyenne prepared for the imminent confrontation with Custer's troops, they experienced a tumultuous blend of fear and determination. Weasel Bear, having recently witnessed the chaos of battle, felt the ancestral weight compelling him to advance. Simultaneously, Drags the Rope, driven by a profound loyalty to his people, hurried to alert them of the advancing soldiers. Their narratives converge in a compelling first-hand account that not only illustrates the harsh realities of war, but also highlights the unyielding spirit of those who fought to protect their land and heritage. Join us as we explore this remarkable story of courage and sacrifice, a significant episode in the history of Custer's Last Stand. Before we proceed, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. In the late spring of 1876, we received alarming news in our camp that white soldiers were approaching with the intent to force us onto a reservation, a situation we vehemently opposed. As the grass grew tall enough to nourish our ponies and restore their strength, we resolved to move up the Tongue River, hoping to unite with Sitting Bull at Greasy Grass near the Little Bighorn. About a week prior to our intended move to join Sitting Bull, we learned that some white soldiers were advancing from the south with plans to engage the Sioux. We promptly informed Crazy Horse of this development. Our Cheyenne band, consisting of 57 members, undertook a swift ride, catching the soldiers by surprise at the Big Bend of the Rosebud. During that encounter, we felt the presence of the Great Spirit guiding us, and we successfully repelled the white soldiers, forcing them back south to prevent any further disturbances. Following this crucial battle, our two villages relocated to Greasy Grass to ally with the Sioux, who were under the leadership of their esteemed chief Sitting Bull, while the Cheyennes were led by Two Moons. I was herding horses downriver from our camp when someone rushed in, shouting that the soldiers were approaching. I quickly assisted in driving the pony herd back to the west and then raced to my teepee to retrieve my gun. By that time, Reno's men had dismounted and were positioned in a skirmish line. We charged at them with resolve, but soon Reno mounted his troops and led them in a retreat from the edge of the woods. He crossed the river and ascended a steep bank toward a hill, prompting some of us to pursue the soldiers. At that moment, Chief Little Wolf rode among us, urgently calling for us to return, warning that more soldiers were preparing to attack us downriver. My friend Kills in the Night had lost his horse in the chaos, so I helped him mount behind me, and we rode as swiftly as we could. We crossed the river and followed a ridge until we spotted a loose horse nearby. My friend dismounted from my horse and caught the loose one for himself. Dust filled the air, and soon smoke began to rise from the gunfire. As we continued our pursuit, I encountered some soldiers, and my horse was shot from under me. At that instant, I was struck in both my foot and shoulder. Stunned and disoriented, I lay on the ground until my friend Kills in the Night returned for me. He lifted me up, and together we pressed on into the fray. The battle concluded shortly thereafter, with Indians surrounding the white soldiers, ultimately overwhelming them. That night, despite our losses, we celebrated. 7 Cheyenne warriors had fallen in battle, and we took pride in the fact that we were among those who defeated Custer during that encounter. Later that evening, news spread that more soldiers were advancing along Greasy Grass. The following morning, I joined my band across the river to engage Reno's men in combat once more. My foot was swollen and painful, but I secured it with a rope to alleviate some of the discomfort. In the early afternoon, we dismantled our camp and made our way up the river towards the Bighorn Mountains. The day began with intense heat and a clear sky as the morning sun illuminated the valley of the Little Bighorn. There was barely a whisper of wind, and the prolonged dry spell had left the trails coated in dust. With the toe of his moccasin, Deeds nudged at patches of buffalo grass along the lodgepole trail, sending grasshoppers scattering in every direction. Suddenly, his foot connected with something solid. Looking down, he discovered a dull square box, an item unlike anything he had encountered in his life at the great camp by the river. This unusual find piqued his interest, prompting the boy to crouch beside the box. At just 10 years old, Deeds had spent his entire life within the Hunk Papa hunting grounds, far removed from the encroaching settlements of the white men. Fueled by the innocent curiosity of youth, he had yet to adopt the cautious demeanor of a warrior. The box lay in such a manner that its lid was slightly ajar, but it required some effort to fully open it and uncover its contents. From the hide sheath resting against his slender brown side, Deeds retrieved an old skinning knife with a bone handle and began to pry at the lid. As he worked, he glanced around, hoping to catch a sight of his older brother. Brownback was still somewhere up the divide, gathering their grandfather's ponies. Once Brownback returned with the herd, Deeds intended to select his favorite horse and assist his brother in driving the animals back to camp. Afterward, their grandfather, Four Horns, would distribute the ponies along with all of their grandmother's personal belongings. Deeds still struggled to accept the reality of his grandmother's death, which had occurred just before dawn that morning, while the echoes of the all-night scalp dance still resonated in the air. It was difficult to envision any camp without her presence, as she had consistently been there, preparing hides or gathering kindling and wild turnips nearly every day for as long as he could remember. The gravity of death was further underscored by the solemn remarks of Deed's uncle, Sitting Bull, who addressed the family gathered around the old woman's deathbed. He gravely proclaimed that her passing signified an impending, significant event. Perhaps my vision of our enemies entering the camp will soon come to fruition. The adults, including the weeping elder Four Horns, nodded in understanding, while Deeds quietly gazed at what remained of his grandmother. Shortly thereafter, Brownback called him away to assist in bringing in the ponies. Eventually, the lid came off. Inside the box lay crumbling pieces of hardtack bread. The boy brought a flake to his nose and inhaled deeply. It bore no resemblance to the fry bread made by Sioux women. As he took a bite, he instinctively recognized that he was experiencing white man's bread for the first time. At the sudden sound of hoofbeats on the rough trail, Deeds looked up, anticipating Brownback approaching with the herd. Still chewing on the hardtack, he turned quickly, realizing the hoofbeats were coming from behind him. 3 white soldiers were charging toward him, firing their carbines. "He's got the box!" one of them shouted as gunfire shattered the morning calm. Before Deeds could shout or flee, a soldier's bullet struck him squarely in the chest, knocking him down. Brownback, still on foot, rushed toward the sound of gunfire, closely followed by an Ogallala youth named Drags the Rope. His ponies had wandered up the divide during their long night grazing, and he hurried to assist his young hunk-papa cousins. A quick glance confirmed that he was too late. Deeds lay lifeless, a gruesome wound piercing his lungs. Without dismounting, the soldiers opened fire on the older boys as they advanced. One soldier, adorned with stripes on his sleeves, appeared to be directing the other 2. As he evaded the lethal carbine fire, Drags the Rope sought temporary shelter and relied on his training as a warrior's apprentice to make a swift decision. He maneuvered through the grass to where Brownback was crouched, fearful and uncertain, instructing him to flee to their village and raise the alarm. "I will hold off the soldiers until you are safe," he assured. Once Brownback was out of harm's way, Drags the Rope sprang to his feet and began to dash downhill in a rapid zigzag pattern. If he could reach the distant cluster of box elders, marking the head of Medicine Tail Coulee to the northwest, he could follow the dry wash down to the river and cross directly into camp. Later, he might even lead a small war party back to locate Deeds' body. Prepared for any eventuality, he anticipated the sound of thundering hooves behind him with each step. An old Sioux war cry resonated in his mind. "This is a good day to die." However, the blue-clad soldiers did not pursue him, and he felt no bullet strike his body as he ran. Once he was beyond their range, they ceased firing entirely. He glanced back and observed all 3 soldiers riding down the lodgepole trail, the historic Indian route that traversed the Wolf Mountain Divide from Rosebud Creek to the Greasy Grass, the name the Sioux used for the Little Bighorn River. If they continued on their current course, they would inevitably encounter the southern end of the vast village, precisely where the Hunk Papas were encamped. Perceiving the presence of additional soldiers hidden somewhere along the divide, Drags the Rope instinctively understood that these troops had just initiated the first shots of what would become a pivotal conflict for both Native Americans and white settlers. He returned to camp shortly after Brownback's arrival, having navigated a wide route along the divide, reaching as far as the headwaters of Tulloch's Creek before making his way cross-country toward Medicine Tail Coulee. He descended to the ford and crossed into the village. Upon his arrival, he reported seeing only 3 white soldiers, which led the Ogallala camp to remain relatively unconcerned until an alarm was raised just minutes later. At that moment, he joined Crazy Horse, engaging in combat alongside the Ogallala leader throughout much of the fierce battle that ensued. I trust this first-hand account provides you with a fresh perspective on the Battle of Little Bighorn in the Great Sioux War of 1876. Stay tuned for more videos of this nature. I look forward to sharing additional first-hand accounts of various battles, so have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.